women's liberation.
You just went to the bathroom.
Alright, so I personally am a little nervous, so I might be reading a little bit, but that means you can just look at all the pretty pictures up here. Alright, so women's liberation. Women have always been fighting against oppression, whether it's for equal rights, maternal leave, contraceptive aid, the right to vote, the right to have a house. There's always a battle at hand for women to fight. Because of these battles, history shows that we have made incredible strides in our struggle. This presentation is going to go over a few examples of these strides and kind of cover a few examples of what was effective and what wasn't. So, history. Women in the People's Republic of China. Women under feudal China. Women's liberation in China cannot be truly appreciated without first looking at where women have been. Under feudal China, women were considered property. The average woman's duty was to cook, clean, weave, sew, care for children, and bear sons. Any other duty that was given to them was at the discretion of the man. Confucius. The standard for a woman's life was set beneath the teaching of Confucius. Confucius' teachings were the main battle that Chinese women had to fight. The teachings of Confucius and women were the three obediences and four virtues. So the three obediences and four virtues. Obey thy father before marriage, obey thy son after marriage, obey thy son in in widowhood. Virtues: morality, proper speech, modest manner, and diligent work. So, hold on. Keeping this in mind, marriages were not chosen by women. The only thing that women were thought to be good for was bearing a son. These obediences left women out of power. It's kind of crummy. Foot binding also occurred frequently, and in many situations the diet, hold on, my notes aren't adding up. Yeah, okay, so sorry. In many situations the desire for a son was so strong, daughters would be left and sold into slavery. If a girl was fortunate enough to be kept, they were likely to have their feet bound. Because women with bound feet gave family status, women would potentially just grow up without the opportunity to walk like a normal human being. And oftentimes when, because they had such, peasants would make their wives work in the field on their hands and knees because they couldn't stand for the hours that they were made to work in the fields. It's pretty horrific. May 4th, 1919, a movement against Japanese imperialism broke out, and this was kind of the first spark to women's liberation in China. It kind of gave women the confidence to gain a political opinion and become conscious of the fact that they're oppressed. 6 months after the May 4th rally, a young woman known as Miss Chow decided to take her life because of an arranged marriage she was being forced into. Mao Zedong heard the news and felt he needed to write an article about it. In his article, he explained that Miss Chow was trapped, and if society was good, she would have still been alive. The article allowed women not only to see the future into their own oppression, but also to talk amongst themselves about it. Mao Zedong was an inspiration to women. In 1921, the Communist Party of China was founded. Women were being organized into the party through factories, offices, schools, etc. For every task the party took on, women were encouraged to join the struggle. There were many women organized as support groups against Japan to help the 8th Route Army. Women units showed their quality by participating in surprise attacks side by side with men. During one of these surprise attacks, the transport lines were attacked, and women would keep the pace with men by taking out sleepers while men lifted the rails. It's kind of a cool story, I like that one. One of my favorite people that I read about while researching this was Ho Chan Ching. She is one of my favorite people because she joined the party in 1932 while teaching at an elementary school. 6 years later, she became the deputy secretary of her village party branch. She was a slight of build and very brave. She wore docked hair and tunics with buttons down her shirt and a towel on her head along with her comrades in a self-defense unit. She walked around with a pistol in her belt as she drilled the other women in her branch. She also participated in the Left Guard campaigns by smearing soot over reactionary slogans, then put anti-Japanese slogans over them. I thought she was pretty badass. Women's benefits. So women were no longer considered beneath men. They were given equal education, equal job opportunity, equal pay, freedom of marriage, and equality between men and women. This means they no longer had to live by Confucius ideas and were no longer expected to bind their feet. The emancipation of the land ownership allowed women to live as they pleased. Liberation of women in Cuba. Where did they start out? In Batista, Cuba, women played the roles of caring for the children, though they had no education and lived in huts. They also had to take on the role of working if they could, and most of their houses lacked running water, and the poor houses had no flooring. Women's desire to fight. Women's bloodthirst. When the battles began, women played the roles of caring for men. They were the caregivers of men, and they played a non-combative role. This didn't last. Before long, women had grown tired of the bandaging of men, and they felt like they needed to pick up the rifle themselves. Women began to put pressure on Fidel to give them the rights to armed struggle. It didn't take much for Fidel to agree to this change. Oh, that's sorry, I'm a little disorganized now. I dropped my cards. They were all my thoughts on paper. All right. No. Not, maybe I'm a little mixed up in my titles. Hold on. I'm working on it. 14. Okay, sorry. All right. On September 4th, 1958, Fidel had a meeting with various other leaders to convince them that women were capable of fighting in combat for the revolution. The question was asked, how can we give rifles to women when there are so many men who are unarmed? Fidel's response was, because they are better soldiers than you are, they're more disciplined. In any event, I'm going to put together a squad, and I'm going to teach them how to shoot. Now I'm, okay, yeah, sorry. All right, Fidel took 8 women and taught them how to shoot. They had to hit a coin the size of a quarter from 20 to 30 meters away. When Fidel would drill the girls, he demanded that they split that coin. Isabel Rio was named the commanding officer as a result of target practice. Fidel had decided that the best shot of the platoon would become the head. The women's platoon of the army was well known for its discipline, courage, and led the way for men when men were afraid. Men quickly changed their opinions of women because of this, and it was early on in the revolution. And Fidel ended up using the Mariana Grajales. I'm sorry I'm slaughtering that, I know I am. But he ended up using them as his personal security. All right. Federation of Cuban Women, and I'm going to slaughter this or the word on the bottom, so I'm not even going to try this time. But the official acronym is FMC, so I may use that in the future, just to forewarn you all. So Federation of Cuban Women was established in 1960. It was a group of organized women that worked to bring women out of their homes and into the economy. Reorganizing peasant households and keeping women keep women in subservient roles. They also fought for childcare and providing equal opportunities for women. They worked to get women into the leadership roles of the government, and just to satisfy the particular needs of women, and doing it through organization. Okay, I'm more disorganized again because I dropped all my cards and nothing's in order. I apologize yet again. All right, so women's rights. Women have access to many forms of birth contraceptions, and abortion is legal and accessible. All healthcare is free. Divorces are easily obtained, and they're usually initiated by women. The FMC runs free childcare services for children under 7, and there are heavy penalties for pimping in Cuba. Prostitution was nearly eradicated until the fall of the Soviet Union, and discrimination based on gender, ethnicity, or religion is outlawed in Cuba by the Constitution. And Cuba has the 3rd highest proportion globally of parliamentary seats held by women. They put in quotas for women to study medicine, which was so successful that they also had to introduce quotas for men. Women in the Soviet Union. Now let's see if I can find this card. Okay, hold on. All right. Where did they start out? During the Russian Empire, only nobles were allowed land. Peasants were made to work the land they were living on, and peasants also had a strong sense of religion. This resulted in women basically being the bottom of the barrel and being like, well, God says so, so I guess I better do it. Women had to work and leave their children at home for less money than men. They had no representation. They were considered caregivers for the family, even though they had to sell their labor. Even women of the noble class had fewer rights because they were not allowed any kind of Pauline law, which is like where, yeah, it excludes women from inheriting stuff. So, a Trovalsky group. A music composer named Trovalsky organized a group of students primarily dedicated towards studying music. These groups of students were open to everyone, including women. This allowed women to become radicalized and opinionized through the St. Petersburg controversy, which was a music controversy. And this opportunity sparked women to begin fighting for their rights. It was one of the first opportunities women had to gain leadership skills and begin to organize themselves. Women of the Soviet Union, liberation of women. The liberation of women in Russia started during the late 1850s. Women of the bourgeoisie took an interest in the manifestation of feminism as a defense for their class privilege. In later years, utopian ideologies were funneled into the movement, radicalizing the feminist movement. It wasn't until the October Revolution that women had equal rights. Many did not realize what this meant, so Soviets began a campaign to raise consciousness of women throughout Russia. They wanted to have as much say as men in the political aspect of of the government, I mean. They organized women into their own Congress and encouraged women to participate in politics. And somehow I skipped that, so we're just going to scratch that slide. Women in combat. There are women that served in the Soviet Union and received an award, the hero of the Soviet Union. Hero of the Soviet Union is the highest medal any soldier of the Soviet Union can acquire. Valentina Gorobadova. I am so bad with saying names, I apologize. Born in Ukraine, was one of the first female pilots of the Soviet Union. She was the commanding officer of the 101st Long Range Air Regiment. She was awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union, Hero of the Socialist Labor, 2 Orders of Lenin, Order of the Red Star, and various other awards. Lyudmila Pavlichenko, born in Ukraine as well, and developed a good shot from a young age. When Germany began to invade the Soviet Union, she was quick to volunteer. She was assigned the Red Army's 25th Rifle Division, credited with 103 kills, including 26 enemy snipers. She's regarded as the most successful female sniper in history. She was wounded by a mortar fire, and because of her growing status, she was pulled from combat. Shortly after recovering from her wounds, she was sent to Canada and to America, where President Roosevelt welcomed her for the first time in history had anybody welcomed a female Soviet into America. And also, Eleanor Roosevelt asked her to tour America with her stories. Now, reporters from Washington, D.C. showed her no remorse while commenting on the length of her skirt, being that women in America have shorter skirts. And in uniform, how her uniform made her look fat. Kind of petty, but kind of how some things happen sometimes. Zoza Kanodendyansky, I'm sorry. Born in Russia, she was awarded the Hero of the Soviet Union when Stalin noticed an article about her. The article said that she had joined the Komsol, the all-union Leninist Young Communist League. She and her comrades snuck into the German territory where they had mined roads and cut communication cables. She was told to burn down the village where the German cavalry regiments were. She was caught and tortured for information, but she didn't give in. And the story goes that while she was being hanged, she called out a speech to her comrades saying, "Comrades, why are you so gloomy? I'm not afraid to die. I'm happy to die for my people." And then shortly after, she called to the Germans, "You'll hang me now, but I'm not alone. There are 200 million of us. You can't hang us all." Her body was taken down after 2 weeks, and the Soviets had taken the land over again. Women's rights. After the Bolshevik Revolution, they received the same formal rights as men. These included free medication, education, kindergartens, nurseries, female health care, maternity leave, available contraception, etc. Women quickly outweighed men as doctors and frequently got better grades than men. Yeah. All right, so gone over a lot of communist people. We might as well talk a little bit about women's liberation in Utah, Utah and the United States. Okay, so the beginning. Women's liberation in the United States begins in 1848. Women can vote, signed into law in 1920. American Birth Control League, aka Planned Parenthood, is founded in 1921. Now let's see if these cards are in order again, because I need to continue on. Oh, well, that also helps when I'm skipping around more than I should. Discrimination on the basis of race and sexuality is banned in 1965. In 1966, the National Organization for Women is founded. In 1967, President Johnson's affirmative action policy attempts to cover discrimination based on gender passes, or some crap. 1968, sex segregation, help wanted ads are illegal. 1969, California adopts the no-fault divorce law, which spreads to the rest of the country. Equality of property division during a divorce. Oh, I don't know what's happening here. I should pay closer attention to what I'm doing. 1976, the first real law against rape is enacted in Nebraska. A man can no longer rape his wife. Pregnancy Discrimination Act bans employers from discriminating against pregnant women. 1949, Violence Against Women's Act tightens penalties for sex offenders. It also trains police how to beat out of people more effectively. Is this a joke? No, this is not a joke. No one is laughing here. The current day women's rights is horrible. Although we are perceived to have real equal rights, it's clear that we don't. Many of the rights we have been given are blatantly ignored and are constantly under attack. If women were given a fair and equal rights, we would have daycare for everyone, easy access to abortion and contraception, sexism out of the workforce, and etc. The lack of these basic rights for women shows just how little our government does for us. We've been fighting this battle for over a century. When does it end? Let's not forget the names of those who tried really, really hard to get things to change. Helen Keller. Although often forgotten, Helen Keller was one of the strongest women in history. After losing her sight and hearing at a young age, she still managed to fight the goal and fight for women's suffrage and support women to have birth control in a substantial way. She was also a radical socialist. Emma Goldman. Although she was not supportive of the first wave of feminism, Emma Goldman is a passionate advocate for women's rights. She wrote about many things on anarcho-feminism, where patriarchy is a hierarchy which should be resisted along with state power and class division. She also advocated for education about contraception towards women. She saw abortion as a consequence of social conditions and birth control as a positive alternative. Where did my last card go? That's not it. Oh, there it is, sorry. I'm kind of disorganized. Angela Davis was an incredibly strong woman. After she was found not guilty for kidnapping, conspiracy, and murder charges, she found herself in a position perfect for speaking out on behalf of the oppressed. As a black woman, she publicly opposed the Vietnam War, racism, sexism, the prison industrial complex, and along with publicly supporting gay rights and other social justice movements. She was also awarded the Lenin Peace Prize for the Soviet Union for her civil rights activism, and she was also a communist. So, Helen Keller, socialist, Emma Goldman, communist, Angela Davis. Or Emma Goldman, anarchist, Angela Davis, communist. Conclusions. Women's liberation is less effective under capitalism because the oppression of women is simply profitable. Time and time again, communist countries have given women full equality by simply leveling the playing field. Communists share their knowledge and with hard work fight for the liberation of women. The only time we seem to win is when women's right is profitable, or when they don't give it to us. We're just gonna throw this place over. And I'm going to end this scattery presentation with a quote. Marx said, "You can judge any society by the status of women." That's all.
Did you want to take Q&A on the record?
Either way is fine. I mean,
okay.
Maybe I'll have you exit later if it's too embarrassing, but any questions?
Yeah, so after women achieved full equality in the communist countries, why do you think they didn't achieve leadership positions?
What do you mean?
I mean, all of the leaders on all the slides you showed were men.
Yeah.
You know, Castro decided that he would form a squadron of women.
I would say that I don't think, first of all, women had the status or confidence to be in a position of leadership at that time. Because they had just received equal rights, I think it takes time for things like that to develop. So maybe Greg has a better explanation as well.
Part of it is actually that the study of communist countries, especially done in the West, is inherently racist and sexist. The simple fact of the matter is, it's not controversial. You can look up any history of, for example, China. Jiang Qing was Mao's wife, but not simply Mao's wife. Maybe we shouldn't get this on camera. Had there not been the movement towards capitalist voters under Deng Xiaoping, Hu Guangfei, who were the right wing of the Chinese Communist Party, it's very likely that Jiang Qing would have been the leader of China. So you would have had a woman as literally the leader of the most populous communist country. There were right-wing elements that prevented that from happening, but Jiang Qing was one of 5 leaders, I mean the Gang of Five. She was literally part of the Gang of Five, which were the preeminent leaders of the Cultural Revolution, which was kind of what China was about for 10 years.
Right. So they hit the status the U.S. Congress has now.
More.
20%. Yeah, we have 20%.
Well, I mean, there's a big difference from having like representative leaders that are supposedly in charge and Jiang Qing. Like, she was calling the shots in the Gang of Five, unquestionably, which is why she was arrested, imprisoned, and ultimately committed suicide, although probably killed by the right-wing Chinese government.
So do you think that putting the laws in place solves the problem?
It's good. Well, that's the Shelby.
Yeah, I think it does seem like a good start considering the fact that we haven't even got the laws here now. So look at where we're at considering. Like, we don't even have it in text, so I don't think we'll get
Well, I mean, I guess the problem is that the laws that they do have now are not enforced. So there's a question of, should we push for more laws or should we push for, if, it's not as though we have to pick one.
I have my own personal opinions. I think that as the Revolutionary Students Union, there are things, but my personal opinion would be the laws in place here are just pretty words for the system that we have in place, and they don't do anything. And because of that, they only enforce the ones that they care about, and the ones that they don't care about, they push to the side. I think that in a different society, we would have the laws that would be in place wouldn't just be like pretty words. Like if you notice, and I don't know, maybe I didn't present it well enough, but the majority of the reason why these women were actually liberated was not just because like they said so. It was because of the actual work that these people put into gaining these rights by taking actions and being a part of things and encouraging other people to also be a part of them.
Just to point out 1 or 2 things, Cuba's actually only had 2 leaders, and both of them were the people that headed the revolution. Like, so that's just worth pointing out. It's not that women haven't had a chance, it's just that people love Fidel Castro and nobody else has been elected except for Raul Castro. So, you know, it's just worth pointing out there.
Well, as a side note, many of the head female leaders, I want to say it's the head of the industrial unions in Cuba is actually a woman. And in fact, I want to say Maria Castro has actually been spearheading both women's liberation and sexual liberation in Cuba. I mean, Fidel has changed his opinions over time, but the Gay Pride Parade in Cuba, Havana, is led by the daughter of Fidel Castro. So to say that she's not an important leader, well, okay, maybe she's not the head of state, but that's a big difference from, you know, not being a leader. And additionally, women have always had better rights in communist countries than they even have in incredibly progressive capitalist countries, Sweden, Denmark, Norway. These countries don't even have the basic rights that women have in the Soviet Union and China.
Specifically what?
Someone else can say as well, just so you know.
Oh,
It's okay.
I'm done. So,
No, go ahead. You were
I was
gonna
just
counter
wondering
that.
what they don't have in Iceland that they had in Soviet Russia.
economic rights, protections of childcare. They do have, I forget the exact word, it's both men and women can have time off when a child is born.
Maternal leave.
Paternal leave, yeah, there you go. But none of those were as long as they had in the Soviet Union. They weren't paid as much, they're still not paid as much as they were in the Soviet Union, comparable purchasing power parity. Retirement benefits, they don't have comparable retirement benefits because it's pegged to earned income rather than just a general Social Security style like retirement benefit, even though Social Security kind of has like a paid-in aspect. It's not universal. Military service, women were not allowed to have, still are not allowed to have military service. I mean, you look at countries like Switzerland. Switzerland just barely gave women the right to vote in '93. Like, that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, the last state to ban marital rape in the United States was in 1992, so I get it.
Yeah. And again, one additional factor to consider is the starting point. Cuba, Russia, the PRC, Vietnam, etc. We're starting in a condition where women were literally property and were on par, probably less, than slaves. Like, you would care for a slave more than you would care for your wife. And the stance and change that they've had is far different from, say, Europe, where women have not been treated well, but weren't considered slaves or worse than slaves, and property, and you know, it was okay to kill your wife because, I don't know, she cooked your meals right.
I mean, except for the law.
Sorry. I was going to say that even though, I mean, you presented like on all, like some great things that happened, but there, I mean, there were bad things that happened also for women. But all we know is that it's still not enough even after this, right? So we move on from there. I don't know. I lost my train of thought because I ran out there and then came back. But I think it's important that we know that it wasn't perfect,
No.
like in Cuba, and it wasn't perfect in Russia, it wasn't perfect in China. As was it Richard Wolff? What's that story? There's a guy named Richard Wolff. He's a pretty prominent communist, and he was talking about, you know, some of the step backs, you know, and I may have already told you, or they thought women need to get out in the workplace and not be like slaves to the household, right? And so they had all this childcare for the women, and then they had like even apartments that had like hookups, like vacuum hookups, so that they had these groups of people that would go in and clean the houses, so the women didn't have to clean the house afterwards. But you know, as the Soviet Union went on, you know, things got worse, and that was like the first thing they cut was women providing this childcare and this cleaning service. But the women were proud to do that because they were, you know, standing up for their country and being good, you know, comrades. So I mean, there's some bad things, but definitely there were a lot of great things, like you presented on, which you did like an awesome job. Thank you, Shelby. I just, you know, there are bad things that happen to women, and
Yeah, I don't think that any kind of system is ever going to be perfect. It's not a world we live in to the point where you're always going to have that kind of struggle where something is always going to be taken away from you and you have to get it back. So.
Yeah.
Expanding on that point, actually, in PRC's one child per family and the forced abortions that have recently come up in the news as well, for a step backwards.
Well, to be fair, that was Deng Xiaoping, that wasn't Mao Zedong. Just as a side note.
As China
Yeah.
moves along, it gets worse and worse.
Yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is Mao didn't, the one-child policy is from Deng Xiaoping and the right wing of the Communist Party of China. It's actually not part of, it was actually part of the repudiation of Mao's ultra-left, quote-unquote, ultra-leftism, exemplified by the Cultural Revolution. So, I mean, it's certainly not optimal. I'm not going to support that. But also, you know, it doesn't correspond to the vast majority of serious communist thought, of which Deng Xiaoping is not part of, nor is Khrushchev or Brezhnev.
No, I was just bringing up bad things that did happen in communist areas. That was just one that I felt was a pretty big one.
Yeah. I think it's good.
I'm not quite sure who
Would
went
it be
first.
Jay can go
okay if we
first.
I've got to go.
We have to go.
Have to work. So, great presentation.
See you later.
See you later, Weldon. Thanks for coming by.
Yeah, great work, guys.
Everybody go to the
If you're here tomorrow, come
Yeah.
come in. Wildon and I are gonna present.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hopefully we can
It
all
probably won't be
meet
as
up
fun.
tomorrow.
It's okay.
I'm sorry, I'm breaking
I like-
the
I
Q&A.
I think you will be awesome.
So, this being the RSU, we probably all agree that until capitalism is broken down, we're not going to see the kind of changes in women's liberation that we would like to see. Not to anything like the full extent, right? Whatever progress is made will be the progress that is convenient for the market. However, even knowing that first even agreeing on that foundation, within anti-capitalist movements, we don't see gender equality. We don't see anything like gender equality, and so we can say that, like, we can attribute a certain amount of that to cultural factors that mean that women don't develop leadership skills, the ability to speak out for themselves, the ability to recognize things that are impacting them either uniquely as women or even just as workers. Like, they're less likely to stand out in those ways. But I can't help but wonder if there are things, what can be done within those movements to make them more welcoming for women while, like, remaining true to their purpose. Because it's a problem. It's a big problem. It's a problem almost everywhere I've ever
Well,
tried
all
to
I
get.
can say to that is come to the next women's group meeting for Utah Women's Group. We'll figure it out ourselves, I guess.
I wish I could.
When is the next meeting? Do you know?
Uh,
We
be
didn't decide yet. No. for
two
the-
2
weeks from
Sundays from previous Sunday.
Oh, okay.
I guess that's what
If you're free that day, you should come.
I'll be in Maryland.
Oh.
Um,
That's
I also wonder, there's something that the whole, like, the question of forced abortion, these things sort of speak to, which is the fact of, like, this domestic labor, like childbearing, like, so it might be that daycares are best for everyone, but the evidence right now shows that they aren't as good for children as having dedicated parents, that children respond really well to having specific caregivers who they have a bond with over the period of years, and that's a very difficult thing to like bring equality to.
Does Rick want to respond to that, or do you have a different statement?
Can I push something out? Or-
Actually, I want to see this conversation continue. I had more to say, but it was heaping on a previous
Oh.
argument. We're good.
So when we're talking about gender equality in the quote-unquote movement, whatever that's supposed to be,
Any movement except the women's movement.
right, it's really important actually to look at national organizations. The fact of the matter is, most organizations are an incredible incredibly myopic. They don't represent the wider movement. As a matter of fact, bad communist movements and organizations show exactly what you're saying. And hopefully, well, nobody watches these anyway, so it can be incredibly divisive and sectarian. Look at the Communist Party USA. Look at most of the Trotskyist organizations. And the vast majority, the Revolutionary Communist Party, you know, we can go down the list. It's all men. They're all based around men. The effective and strong revolutionary movements are not based around men. Workers' World Party, you're not going to find anyone higher than Sarah Flounders, right? Like literally one of their lead speakers, when they talk to foreign press, it's almost always Sarah Flounders. Obviously, a woman. Look for the Party of Socialism and Liberation. Who has been their presidential candidate for the last 20 years? Gloria La Riva. And it's not just lip service. Gloria La Riva is one of the highest members of the PSL. She decides policy, et cetera, et cetera. The Freedom Red Socialist Organization. I don't know to what extent that the names are out there, so I'm not really going to get into it. But the highest political officer that I know of in the Freedom Red Socialist Organization is a queer woman. So that's a big difference, and the leadership body is split between men and women.
If you can point to a good communist organization has like really good gender representation, like what is the RSU doing wrong?
A lot of things. I mean, not that I really want to push this, but a lot of things. What you'll notice is 1, 2, 3, plus summer 4. I'm counting Violet, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're looking at, roughly speaking, 5 to 6 ratio of women to men, if we're going to count that. What is the RSU doing wrong? Well, I mean, it really depends on what sort of struggles we're working on. We have real great men to women representation when we're doing our cosmetology campaign. When we do our cosmetology campaign, it's almost entirely women. And it's me, Trav, and Michael Bacon are the only men involved. But when we're doing like abstract anti-war, anti-racism, et cetera, to what extent are we reaching out to women? Well, not so much. In this society, it's easier to be a politically opinionated man than it is a woman. And so those sorts of actions draw men rather than women. But the fact of the matter is, you know, we still get female representation for most of the actions we take. It's not overwhelmingly men. In fact, I think the U of U RSU is actually more women than men. If I'm...
That sounds about right.
That's great. I was just surprised there was this meeting and then the first year of meetings I attended down at UVU.
Yeah, UVU has all sorts of problems, which is not their fault. It's just they're in Utah County, literally the most reactionary county in the country.
I came out of Utah County.
Yeah. Are you using that as a commendation for yourself? Because I'm not sure that.
I'm using it as a commendation for Utah County.
Oh, good. No, but I mean, that's the thing is, there are active efforts to recruit women. I mean, I'm the only brown person in this room. That's obviously a problem to a certain extent. But I mean, there are active efforts to recruit oppressed nationalities and women and, you know, queer members and what have you. It's just, it's Utah.
Right. I guess my question is, like, is active efforts to recruit the answer? I mean, that's part of the answer, obviously, or are there structural things that need to be addressed? From my perspective, there's never been a truly successful women's movement anywhere. You've never seen, like, you've seen, yeah, like, communist countries did better. Nobody solved it. Not ever. Childbearing has always put, like, you take 1 year off of someone's career, and the impact that makes is trackable to the end of their career. And nobody's figured out how to solve that problem.
Yeah, well, I mean, part of that is we've never lived in a world without capitalism.
Sure.
Like, all of the communist countries have been siege countries. Like, they've always been at war. There's never been a time of peace for any socialist country ever in history.
I'm not saying that I don't want to try socialism first.
Well-
I'm saying, like, it's possible that there is something fundamental about gender struggle, and particularly female parenting, right, and the nature of female parenting that makes it unique from other struggles.
Sure, but then again, the question that we always have to ask is, who was doing it better? And who was doing it better was always the communists. Who was leading, you know, women's rights, reproductive rights struggles? Always the communists. And so, yeah, but here's the thing. That's a concern, and it's a legitimate concern. Who's stopped racism? Right? No one stopped racism, ever. But the conditions that are required for stopping racism are fundamentally different than the world that we live in. It sounds bad, and it...
Particular kinds of racism have been dissolved, like in particular contexts.
We've just gone in the closet instead of being out in the open.
Yeah.
That's
Partially, yeah. But again, I like to point this out, and I will continue to point this out, probably till the day I die. Stalin was a Russian Mexican. Like, when you have, and so was Khrushchev, right? If you talk about repression in the Soviet Union, it's all about how bad Ukraine got it. Okay, where was Khrushchev from? He was a factory worker from the Ukraine. It's not optimal, it's not an answer, it doesn't solve racism in the Soviet Union. There was still racism in the Soviet Union. But nevertheless, what are the social conditions that we can create that make those struggles easier to solve? And the answer has historically been communism.
I'm not.
Yeah.
Like, that's what I started with.
Okay.
yeah.
But I would also like to point out we don't have like the widespread employment discrimination against Irish people and Italian people in this country that we used to have.
They
Right.
just changed scapegoats though.
Just black and brown people.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
They've just fighting another person. The culturalization of even me as being a very strong activist in the female community, I even find myself with culturalization of finding myself in sexist tendencies, just because it's so rampant in society that I'm just like, I just did that. I just did this. Why am I doing this? And it's a constant of interflection of who I am and what the environment around me is doing to me. So I'm a male feminist. Like, I fight for feminism. That's like one of my favorite, activist community groupings is feminism. And I'm still a guy, and I can never know like totally what it is to be a woman and have all those effects. I can go to the bar and I can set down a drink and I don't have to worry about getting roofied. I can walk 20 blocks to my place and not worry about getting raped. It's and I have friends that have to do that. They always have to have that background check that I don't even realize. Or I try to realize, but then I can just offset and be like, oh, whatever, because I'm a guy. I think that we're going to have to attack the culturalization, whether it's communist or capitalist or whatever, what the base is. And it's not going to be like tomorrow we're going to have the feminist, communist, socialist environment. It's going to be almost a generational thing where we're going to have to nip all of these things in the butt, and not maybe through procreation and through generations, but it's one of those things where it's so ingrained, even in people who are reactionary against it, like me, that it's really hard. And so I'm a feminist, I'm a guy, and I can be sexist or I can be misogynist sometimes. And just being able to understand that and being able to take that to heart and fix it when you notice it. So.
Yeah, I'd like to get your opinion on what you think about the sort of sense of different various forms of utopianism when engaged with feminist efforts, as it would be with, say, like racial efforts. I don't think racism is ever really going to end. Neither is sexism, and neither are various other isms, whether it be under capitalism or communism. The question is how can we engage in a realistic argument where we can acknowledge the accomplishments through the various, throughout all of time, in capitalist countries and in communist countries, and not need to engage in this sort of like utopianist sort of like, oh, we've reached the end of discriminating against, women and things like that. So what do you think the thoughts are on that?
I agree in the sense that I think that, as I said previously, when you earn something, it's never definite, and you're going to always have to fight back for it, because I think that just in like how society runs, things change so frequently that there's always going to be something that changes to make whatever it is that was accomplished in the past. It'll just be something that's like, for some reason, thought poorly of, and you're going to have societies revoking certain rights just to find out later on that they wanted those rights, and you're going to have to fight back for them again. I think it's just kind of a yo-yo effect. But go for it.
The fundamental question is a question of power. It's always uncomfortable to say something, but the struggle for communism is a struggle for power. The struggle against racism is a struggle for power. The struggle for women's liberation is a struggle for power. I'm gonna just say, this is a room full of fucking crackers. You're all a bunch of honkies. And you're laughing, and it's kind of a joke. Also, it's true, and you'll notice you're not particularly offended. Like, Louis C.K. does the best thing, and he's like, he says, I would choose white all the time. It's not that white is better, it's just, white people aren't better, it's just better being white. I can get in a time machine and I can go to whatever year, and it's great, because I'm white. And they'll be like, oh, here, sir, yes, have a wonderful time. If you're black, anything before 1970, you're like, whoa, no, don't want to go there. Like, you can't even hurt my feelings. You're like, yeah, honky? Like, what can you call a white man? A cracker? Oh, man. Reminds me of owning land and people. Ruined my day. Right? I mean, that's the thing. You can't offend white people by calling them names because it doesn't matter. Call somebody brown a spick, call somebody black a nigger, it matters because ultimately you have the power to lynch them.
I would argue that you can't bother white men by calling them names, but there are names you can call white women that can fight a great deal of violence.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
call them a bitch.
I was going to say, but that would apply to any color skin of women at that point, though.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, women don't
have... That's a gender equality issue again.
Yeah, but I mean, that's the
point,
thing.
Right?
It's a question of power. When we reach a society where, like, it's not going to be me, because I'll be dead, hopefully. When, the local party secretary is a Mexican, and people are like, oh, I fucking hate that spick. It's like, yeah, also, I'm in charge of everything. Fuck you, right? That's something, right? And that's what we're looking for, is that sort of racism, where it's still racism, and they're still racist pieces of shit, but they don't have any power. They don't have any power to act on it. They don't have any power to shoot an unarmed black man in the back and get away with it. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a situation where, yeah, women still get called bitches and people are sexist, but guess what? They're your boss. You can't rape them, you can't hit them, you can't force them to carry a child to term because it's partially my child too, right? It's a question of power. And until we equalize those power relations, yeah, the question of sexism, racism is utopian. Getting rid of it is utopian. Because racism and sexism are not someone was a dick to me because of the color of my skin. or because of my gender. There are institutional powers that prevent me from living a full human experience. That's what we need to eradicate. And that's something we can eradicate. Whereas someone was a dick to me because I'm different from them is not something that we can ever get rid of, I don't think.
Any more comments? All right, I think that's probably.
Let's get some food, damn it.
Yeah,
I'm so hungry.
I am too.
Ugh.
I hate this